We've now made it to the third and final part of the Directory for Catechesis. In the first parts, we've looked at what catechesis is and who is a catechist. In the second part, we've looked at how we catechize and who we catechize. And in this third part, we're going to look at catechesis in the particular churches, how catechesis takes place in the local Christian community to which we belong. As we've seen, the Directory is really keen to give us the big picture when it talks about catechesis. Before it tells us what catechesis is, it talks about divine revelation. Before it tells us who is called to catechize and who is called to be catechized, it talks about baptism. This section of the Directory continues that trend. It begins with the big picture. Before it starts to talk about our particular church, it talks about what the church is. The Directory presents the church to us as the community gathered around the living Word of God, Jesus Christ, reborn in baptism and nourished by his body and blood in the Eucharist. It quotes Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, who said, "The Church is built upon the Word of God. She is born from and lives by that Word. Today too the ecclesial community grows by hearing, celebrating and studying that Word." The Directory offers Mary, the Mother of God, to us as our model for the Church. It says, "The model of the people of God is Mary, virgin of listening, who kept all these things, pondering them in her heart." The Directory then reminds us that all the members of the people of God, the people who are gathered around the Word of God, listening to and nourished by that Word, share in their Church's mission of evangelization. By mission of evangelization, we mean the task given to the Church by Jesus himself of spreading the message of the Gospel. This is an idea that played a really significant role in Part 1 of the Directory, and it's mentioned again here in Part 3. And here, the Directory stresses that each of us shares in this mission of evangelization in a different way, depending on our particular gifts, our particular roles, our particular state of life. This is all context for the Directory's discussion of catechesis in our particular church, our own local Christian community in which we live and worship. The Directory tells us that the particular church is a portion of the people of God, and like the universal church, so too is each particular church our participant in evangelization. In other words, our local community has a responsibility to carry out this mission of evangelization entrusted to the Church as a whole. But it does so in a way suited to its specific context and the particular needs of its members. Each particular church is called upon to carry out catechesis as an expression of evangelization within its own cultural and social context. We can see here links to Part 2 of the Directory, which talks about the process of catechesis and encourages us to think about how God meets his people where they are, speaking to them in ways they know and understand, in order to communicate his divine message. This is what we are called to do in the context of our particular church. But what exactly does the Directory mean by particular church? What kind of local Christian community is it talking about? The Directory goes into detail using 3 examples: parishes, groups and associations, and Catholic schools. First, the Directory talks about parishes. The Directory describes the parish as being founded on the pillars of the Word of God, the sacraments, and charity. It is a place where human communities are brought even into physical contact with the means of salvation, principally the Word of God, baptism, and the Eucharist. Because of this, parishes are important centres of catechesis. To understand why, we can think back to what the Directory has said in the first part of the Directory about the tasks of catechesis and the identity of the catechist. In the first part, we were given an outline of the tasks of catechesis: imparting knowledge of the faith, enabling participation in the liturgy, formation in the moral life, the teaching of prayer, and deeper integration into the community of the church. The parish is a very fruitful setting in which to carry out these tasks. We also read in the first part that a catechist is a teacher, a witness, and an accompanier. It is in this parish setting that this teaching, witnessing, and accompanying can take place. But the Directory is keen to point out that recognising the importance of parishes does not mean that ecclesial experience is confined to them. Many of us have grown deeply in our faith in a setting outside of a parish, for instance, a university chaplaincy or an association like the Neo-Catechumenal Way. The Directory praises these associations and groups for their rediscovery of the community dimension, the reinforcement of aspects of Christian life like listening to the Word, and the practice of piety and charity. We can see that these associations and groups are, just like the parish, places where the tasks of catechesis can be carried out. For instance, imparting knowledge of the faith, formation in the moral life, and teaching of prayer, as well as being places where the teaching, witness, and accompaniment that make up catechesis are possible. Finally, the Directory talks about Catholic schools. It describes Catholic schools as places which make the Church's mission visible above all in the fields of education and culture, which has the particular church of the local parish as its point of reference. So we can see how the Catholic school brings out the teaching aspect of catechesis and the catechetical task of imparting knowledge while supporting and being supported by the community of the local parish. So let's sum up what part 3 of the Directory for Catechesis has said so far. We've learned that the particular churches, that is our local community in which we live and worship, share in the mission of evangelization of the universal church. 3 examples of places where catechesis takes place in the particular church are parishes, groups and associations, and Catholic schools. In each of these places, the tasks of catechesis can be carried out in a way adapted to the social and cultural context of the particular church and adapted to the needs and abilities of the people being catechized. We're now coming towards the end of the Directory for Catechesis. In our next and final video, we'll be looking at what the Directory says about catechesis in different cultures.